Good morning, everybody. Welcome to Solidarity Live. We're here with only a few short days till the election. Alex, good morning. How are you?
Morning, Jocelyn. Well, it's 2020, so that is the limit of how good you can be doing. But within those confines, pretty well. I'm looking forward to today's show. We have Kara Voght, who is a reporter with Mother Jones, to talk with us about, I don't know, some of the scary eventualities that we might see in a few days. And then maybe Jocelyn, you and I can just rant about things and then discuss how solidarity is the thing that can get us through everything, including the scary eventualities that Kara has been reporting on. With that, Kara, you want to say hello to everybody?
Yeah, hi everybody. It's nice to be here. It's nice to be talking about the doomsday scenarios that we might encounter on November 3rd and beyond.
What just lay out a little bit like what you were looking into with this reporting and what you found.
Right. So I think it's pretty well documented at this point in various ways how President Trump might just kind of run roughshod over the results of the election. Earlier in the fall, he was threatening to not commit to a peaceful transfer of power, which I think he eventually did. And since then, he's sort of been casually saying, I hope the courts, stop the counting of mail in ballots. I hope the courts intervene. I hope the courts do this on my behalf. I hope the state legislatures don't validate results if they don't look the way that I want them to, which is a very overt attempt to suppress voting and a dog whistle to people that the results of the election should not be trusted. The Biden campaign and Democrats everywhere have lawyered up. It looks a lot like 2000 in terms of how they're trying to fight every court battle and every board of election on making sure that the votes are counted. But what I have found is that there's a huge amount of the grassroots resistance that's also taking it upon themselves to get ready for civil disobedience and to show up in the streets on November 4th if any of the scenarios that Trump has threatened actually come to pass. And these people are people who, it was a renaissance for them when Trump was elected. People who maybe hadn't been politically active before, the sorts of indivisible moms or MSNBC moms that people joke about. They're planning rallies at courthouses. They're training themselves in how to stay nonviolent in the face of violence. They're training themselves in what to do if you can't trust the institutions like the police or the military who might be showing up in their towns and cities, and what to do about local militia and Proud Boys and the sort of right-wing intimidation that they've been facing, which I think a lot of people have missed. That something that in my reporting that really has blown my mind is that we know about what happens in the Pacific Northwest when Antifa and the Proud Boys have faced off against one another. We know about Charlottesville. We know what happened in D.C. When the president sicked federal agents on protesters in Lafayette Park outside the White House. But right-wing people are showing up to intimidate middle-aged white women in the suburbs. They're showing up in cities to intimidate protesters of color. They're showing up in rural areas. But yeah, this is a really big concern, and a lot of people are taking it upon themselves to make sure democracy survives past November 3rd.
Well, Kara, I'm really excited about what you're saying because I think the thing that I keep thinking about and we keep thinking about here is at a certain point when the public institutions are becoming less trustworthy, it becomes a question for private people. How do you respond when your government isn't behaving in ways which are I'm trying to be as diplomatic about this as possible because
Don't
I
be
know you're a
diplomatic.
reporter.
This is our show.
Well, I get that, but I don't want to besmirch this fine woman's credibility with my partisan rhetoric.
I can choose how I want to respond. You go forth.
Thank you, Kara. Regardless, I think it's really interesting. Is what you're seeing inspiring or is it kind of like scary?
I think it's inspiring. I think the way that people decide that they have a part to play in democratic institutions is really not to get too Aaron Sorkin West Wingy on all of us, but it's sort of what that's the point, right? Like this is a participatory. We are a republic, as our as our friends who are sticklers like to say. But like the entire premise of American form of government is that there is participation, and people, a lot of people in the Trump era realized for the very first time that they are not above the actions of the government, and that they are not, that it doesn't matter if they vote, which is sort of the base level thing, and then it matters to participate in civic institutions, and it matters to rise up when those civic institutions don't protect what the Constitution outlines. So I think that like this is a good thing. The way that, I mean, as someone who's really covered the resistance post Trump in depth, it's remarkable to me how smart people are now about what they can and can't do, what options are available to them. I think resources like the Indivisible Guide has been huge for that. People who now know what their member of Congress even does and what they can ask them to do. People now know what their local governments do. And I think that just the civic education of this moment has been really cool. And now this is the next iteration. It's like, okay, I understand how the institutions work, and now I understand what happens when those institutions fail and what's available to me to put them right back on the track.
I I think this is awesome. I'm so excited to hear that. And do you think this is going to continue?
Totally, totally. I mean, I hope that we don't keep like having to do violence in the
Sure.
streets.
That's not good.
And I mean by that I mean to clarify, trying to de-escalate the potential for violence in the streets. But the I think that people, for all kinds of reasons, are going to stay engaged in grassroots resistance work after Trump, if he doesn't win on November 3rd, which again we still don't know. But there's a whole litany of reasons why a lot of people are now really invested in what happens locally. They have all run for local office. They have roles on city councils and boards of education and library boards, and they're working on getting public housing into their communities. Some or a few projects I've heard people talk about. A lot of their friends are involved. It's a social thing now in a time when we're not really doing church and we're not really doing Little League and we're not doing all the other sorts of things, especially in a pandemic. The sort of grounding that these groups have for people as a social activity has become a huge deal. I think the form they take will be interesting. I think there's two different flavors of resistance work we're going to see. One of them is, I think, pretty DC focused, and that has to do with continuing to pressure members of Congress, senators, and administration to take up more progressive positions on legislation and executive actions. But I think another piece of it will be more locally focused. And I think that a lot of people will maybe turn their attention away from the federal level, which could be a good or bad thing, depending on how you look at it. The resistance, spent the last 4 years all being against something. And if Biden wins and the Senate flips, everyone kind of has to be for something. And for everyone to be for something, I feel like it's a little bit more of a complicated question of how they're going to all work together. But I don't think the engagement goes away. I just think it maybe is a little more divided, a little more diverse in its causes, and we'll see.
I have, I could go two places there because we could talk about what 2008 and what happened there when a lot of the energy, and I was there, put Obama in the White House and then sort of was like, oh, he's got it, and sat back. And that didn't work. So I'll try to end there maybe, but I want to see if you can, I don't know if I can follow my brain on this one, but it's like a Mobius strip that I've noticed because I've been tracking right-wing neo-Nazis, militia. I built a team at Media Matters that did that and had some amazing reporting. It's all the way back to 2010. And they were like, the government is the enemy and they're going to do bad things to me. And so I'm going to go hole up in the mountain with all of my guns and, don't tread on me. This is the Tea Party stuff. And, they obviously, it was a bunch of billionaires pouring money in because they didn't want to tax on their incomes for Obamacare.
People forget about the Tea Party.
Yeah. Because of this Mobius strip thing that happens. Because at the same time, I think sort of, middle-aged women in the suburbs at that time were kind of like, I'm going to step back. Like, I don't think the government is going to do bad things to me. And I think it's more like if I can kind of ignore it a bit. And there's some heated arguments going on over there, but there was a huge segment that just sort of was like, I don't think it affects me that much. And then if you fast forward to Trump, the don't tread on me people are like, no, tread on them. They're like way into government force and power. They're like, yes, the police should have the ultimate ability to murder people whenever they want, and nothing should get in the way of that. It that shift, but at the same time, it's like this other thing that happened where a whole bunch of people who thought that the government um, didn't impact them. It didn't intersect with their lives and they could just sort of ignore it. We're like, I can't ignore it. Wow, this is happening to me, in my community, to my friends. And when I went around the country fighting against Trump care, it was amazing to see who was at the barricades because it was middle-aged and older women who, like, consistently around the country, who were super pissed. And I'm used to that in my rhetoric, but like they were like, and it's that intensity has stayed.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. It's like this flip, and I am betting on them being. They've got more fortitude than the so-called patriots driving around in their giant trucks or boat parades. I don't want to jinx things, but I think boat parades are the stupidest political thing of 2020, of this whole site. Boat parades? Are you kidding me? Um, they're cowards. They're all cowards. They always have been cowards. But now they are trying to intimidate people. They walk around with machine guns outside polling places, right? This is what the civil rights era, you don't mistake what's going on there. This is a bunch of white men walking around with machine guns trying to keep some people from voting.
Yeah.
But they're being faced down by a lot of America standing together. Do you think that is a real analysis, that it's kind of flipped a little bit? Like the anger is now in, and people, once they realize that they have to be engaged or else government can be perpetrated on them, and there is no checking out of it, that is something that will stay. And these sort of patriot MAGA folks, they've already changed their tune so many times. I don't really know where they go, other than walking around with their guns and probably random acts of violence.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? Because I think that there's sort of a hyper engagement on both sides right now. There's a group of the people that you just described, machine gun toting right wing folks who are feeling a sense that their rights are being taken away, broadly defined rights. You have I had this civics teacher in high school who always used to say, the revolution will be carried out by the disillusioned graduate students and the hungry mothers of hungry children. And I feel like that is like definitely the coalition we've seen emerge in the Trump era, of super engaged people who also, what we were talking about before, are here to stay. I don't really know what happens to them, Alex, the right wing after this. I mean, you've been looking at this longer than I have. I'm very curious to see if they do just kind of retreat into their caves, Puff the Magic Dragon style, or if they if there are these random acts of violence that continue and there is sort of a more permanent set of. I'm out of my depths to really know much about them. I don't cover them. I have some colleagues who do and have fascinating things to say on this front, but. Yeah, I want to actually, can we talk for a second about the '08 situation? Because I think it's a really important one to return to. So here's the thing. I think that, to your point about what happened and how people felt like their man Obama was in the White House and they could just chill out and not protest, as well as I do that like no one on the left thinks Joe Biden is their guy. A lot of people in the center left don't even really think Joe Biden is their guy. Very, very much so distrustful of him all the way through the primary, continued to be so through the general. I have written story after story about this like very engaged left that in DC in particular. I'm curious what that looks like outside of DC after the election, but who like, I mean, I would write stories about the progressive push on the Biden campaign. And I would even, the past couple of weeks, I've been doing a lot of stories on that. And the replies I get from some people on Twitter are like, what's wrong with you? Like, why are you like, doesn't everyone know he has to win first? And yes, totally. I think everyone on the left totally acknowledges that. But there's, they've never let go. They've never given him a break. And have been angry at every turn, at any slight that could suggest that he's not taking them seriously. So no, I mean, I think every outlet has written the story at this point about how the left is just not going to let Joe Biden get away with anything, as best they can.
Which is going to be good for Joe Biden. This is what we learned most of all in 2008. In 2008 to 2010, try to connect the Nazis back in,
right.
Is that the 2008 to 2010 is when the Tea Party was created,
right.
because the left progressive power kept following in behind the compromise of the Obama administration on the fight for Obamacare. And that was just abject failure, because as it did that, it demoralized the grassroots base.
Right.
And it energized this astroturfed Tea Party base, and that led to just a rout in 2010, along with the original sins. If the left had been unified and pushed and said, we will not accept this stimulus, which is too small and specifically designed to fail, and we will not accept bankers not going to prison. If the left was unified of that at the beginning of the Obama administration, a lot of things would look very differently. And it wouldn't be that Obama's power was diminished. He would have had a much easier time actually governing if it wasn't just, because remember, after the Tea Party, I got to go to Jocelyn. I've been talking the whole time. That's the problem with me. The after the Tea Party, it was just one showdown after another, where the Republicans just shut down the government, and we can't let that happen again. We can't. The organized left can't allow the organized right to take all of the energy. So I'm just vociferously agreeing with you that it is an entirely different place, and a bunch of it is just like at least some of us were there in 2008. Like, we watched it happen. And now we're like, no, we're definitely not doing that again.
Well,
we all have roles to play.
Expand on that, Alex. I think that where we are, though, is in such a different and better place. I mean, we have this not me, us army that's been built and that's waiting to mobilize. And that's, I think, one of the incredible things about the political movement that has sprung up around the Bernie Sanders campaign. You have this group of people who lost the primary twice and are still ready to mobilize around the policy objectives and political ideologies that tie them together. And I think that is fundamentally different than what we had with the Obama campaign, where, I mean, the Obama campaign was this incredible thing, but I wouldn't say it was a protest movement. I mean, would you? No,
I think it was like a unification on like a particular set of values, which like also Bernie Sanders' campaign is too. But the clarity of the message was it wasn't policy driven. It wasn't idea driven. I mean, the values I think persisted, but Obama was really just sort of all values. Mm-hmm. Right? Like, if I recall, it was John Edwards who was trying to run a policy driven campaign and an ideas driven campaign, and did end up forcing, I think, both Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama to the left a little bit, or at least force them to articulate some ideas. I was talking to Austin Goolsbee a couple of weeks ago, who was obviously one of Obama's econ advisors and eventually led the Council of Economic Advisors in the White House. And he was talking about, reminiscing about the '08 campaign, being on the advisory role and being like, oh man, we had to just keep coming up with stuff because John Edwards kept dropping policy. And it was sort of fascinating.
That's great, though. I love that.
It is. It felt a little reminiscent in some respects of what Elizabeth Warren did this time around too, just in terms of the volume. I mean, obviously Bernie Sanders had his platform kind of set and good to go from the last time around, but even he, I mean, fleshed out a lot of ideas that he had just kind of talked about a little bit last time and hadn't really put policy teeth on. But all this to say that, yeah, I think the movements broadly are just so engaged and so smart. One of my favorites, I'd be remiss not to just mention this as a kind of microcosm example, the very particular movement that emerged around Senator Ed Markey in his fight against Representative Joseph Kennedy for the Massachusetts Senate seat. That I started covering that primary last September. And when I came back around to it this September, there were this army of teenagers who had Twitter accounts and had somehow convinced the senator from Massachusetts to every night log on to their organizing phone banking and say goodnight to them. And they would all say goodnight, Ed Markey. And this is a very silly thing, but
that's real though.
It's so real, but why do they love Ed Markey? Because AOC loves Ed Markey. Why does AOC love Ed Markey? Because he's the co-sponsor of the Green New Deal. Why is the Green New Deal so important to young people? They understand that climate change is the biggest threat, and they are just bullheaded in a movement. And Joe Kennedy is a very liberal guy. In December of 2018, even before there was a Green New Deal, he voiced support for it. This was even before, I think, if my timeline serves me, it was either before or around the time that AOC and then Markey started talking about the Green New Deal. And I think that all this to say that these kids are mobilized and ready, and they are not letting anyone get away with anything, even in even in a very liberal Senate race. The standards are very high for a lot of people who are now engaged in politics. And I think that's going to really continue.
I think it's really exciting. Kara, thank you so much for being here. I'm so excited to read your piece. And I can't wait to hear more from you and hopefully have you on again, maybe.
Would love that. Thanks, guys. Good luck for the last couple of days.
Yes, you too. Stay safe.
Bye.
Bye.
Yeah, the Zoomers are a big. So some of us that were around in 2008, and we're old now, but that's not the important part. I think Kara actually put out shined a light on the fact that younger folks are just really, really engaged in a way, and it started in 2016.
Well, and it's really weird for me to see because, okay, this will not shock you, Alex, but I was the weird politically engaged teenager when I was a youth. And I got made fun of for it. It was not cool then. Are you kidding? People are like, who is this loser who's always talking about climate change and shit? So it's really awesome to see it become not just widespread, but my siblings are teenagers now. And it is so cool for them to be like, wow, you interviewed AOC? You're awesome. That would have never happened in my age group. Nobody cared about a member of Congress, even if she was super charismatic. This is such a new shift. And it's happened very suddenly.
It did. And you just can't overstate what Bernie Sanders' run in 2016 did.
Oh, totally.
It was amazing. And I, as an old person now in this movement, we've worked with Sanders for years, and his message never changed. We used to do events with him, and there'd be no cameras. I built a radio station literally so that we would always have at least one outlet covering our radical policy. And what I loved is after Bernie's first run for presidency, I was so comfortable and used to being like the most radical person in the room in the strategic sense. So not, but my policies, I was really proud of all my radical policies. And then all of a sudden, I'd be talking to people and they're way bigger, bolder. And I'm like, oh man, my policies aren't even that radical anymore. I got to get new policies.
I saw
Um,
you got called out on Facebook over a certain use of the word folks. So you're
I,
not as lefty as you think you are, Alex.
oh
That's
no,
all I'm trying to say.
that was a reverse call out. That was
Was it a call in?
it was I go to a Unitarian church, so you know we do that call in. We care front people. That was I actually think that we can talk about that, but I love that about Zoomers is actually that they are as filled with jargon as I think actually millennials, my generation,
Mhm.
and political activism in my generation sometimes sounds like it's not even connected. It's like it's operating in a different world, and it has like a score sheet that you've got to hit. When I work with younger organizers, people, you know, like Justice Democrats, and that side of things, who I just shorthand as Zoomers, even though I have been told that the Zoomers are like, they're not actually Zoomers, they're young millennials. But it's much more of a just straightforward analysis of like the world is going to burn, all the people are going to die if we don't end the extractive industries. People are dying because they don't have health care, and we need to get people health care. What I just mean is it's a simpler analysis. It doesn't actually have, you don't have to have read 5,000 books, and have like a really niche ideology, to believe in the need for these people centered policies that I think are, you know, that are taking the center stage right now, especially among young people. It's very common sense stuff. So I do think there will be a tension that I don't think people who haven't been around, and again, Trump could definitely win. Trump could definitely steal the election. McConnell could definitely win. It could be Biden wins, McConnell keeps the Senate, right? Like all of the possibilities are still real at this point, 4 days out. But if the Democrats have full control, which would be the first time since 2008, when Obama did, I think that people are going to be sort of shocked at the different type of tension that that brings. And Kara brought it up, like being pushing a positive agenda is very different, and difficult, because it relies on coalitions, and you know it can be brutal because that's when DC is at its absolute stupidest.
Yeah.
So we need that energy and that clarion clarity, and loud focus on what is simple and correct.
And I think, I have a lot of hope. I spent a lot of time with both the Obama and the Bernie Sanders campaign, and it's just such a different energy. I mean, the Obama campaign really was. I mean, everyone says it was hope and change, and it was, but it was also kind of shiny. There were a lot of like tech bros with like degrees from really good schools. Bernie Sanders campaign was not like that at all. Like at all. And I mean that in a good way. These were people who really, really cared about things and wore jeans and like, it's just like a different vibe. And I think when you have that generation of political organizers and thinkers and activists coming of age, that's super exciting. I'm so excited about it. And it's as Kara was saying, people are so educated now. We talk a lot about the downsides of the internet, and I think that's good and healthy. And some of us, me, should be spending less time on their phone. But we don't
And
talk enough.
Facebook creates Nazis. That's true. It just
It's a
does.
Nazi machine. But what we don't talk about enough is I love how when I feel like I learn something online all the time just from bullshitting on social media because people are so smart now. They're so informed. And Yes, it comes with a lot of downsides, but I think about what's going to happen when and if we do have political power and we can act on it. I mean, Alex, you bring this up all the time. The Biden platform has been very much shaped by the Bernie Sanders coalition of the left. And even not to the extent that we'd want, fine. But this is a much more progressive platform than we thought we were going to get.
Absolutely. And I have two things that I see, and they're it's very hopeful, but it also there's going to be tension. The uh, resistance folks who are at the barricades, who I talked about, suburban women, are it is going to be a question of where do they fit in the coalition when it's governing. So the base of the Democratic Party, African Americans, especially Black women, are at the center of the coalition, and then young people. Now, the new thing is you have suburban women and seniors who are sort of added into this coalition. It looks massively different than Obama's, totally different than Obama's. And I wonder where that fits. So are the suburban women going to, pull back? Is it a defeat Trump, or are they going to stay into the, reforming things and moving forward? And I generally think it's got to be the latter. Both seniors and this new suburban voters with the Democratic base saying we have to do a lot to dig out of where we are now. The stonks are, I don't know because I haven't looked, but I imagine the cocaine has run out on Wall Street again, and the stonks are plummeting. And that's just like months late reaction to the fact that we're in an economic depression that the world has never seen before, in the midst of a pandemic that the world has never seen before because it's slow. We don't have to go through all of the COVID stuff, but I think the coalition is going to hold in a way that it didn't in the Obama era because there was so much willingness in the Obama era. I think it did have to do with those tech bros and the sort of like, we've got it. It's like, we've got a solution. Oh, we made an app for it. And I think that people are going to demand more, and from the Biden administration,
Yeah.
from Democrats in the House and the Senate. I and they better, because I think like if they don't, we're kind of screwed, right? Like if it's actually just led up to their own devices, the politicians are not going to deliver what the people need.
Well, and I'm so excited to be alive for this because I think we could be on the verge of a very exciting transition time in history, politically speaking. Anecdotally, I'm sure we have all sorts of stories of watching people that we viewed as sort of centrist Democrats moving rapidly to the left. I don't I used to so my dad is my best friend, but the one thing we used to like argue about all the time was politics. All the time. Because he's like a typical centrist Democrat. He wants gays to get married, but he thinks the poor should get better jobs, or he used to. And it's been really cool to watch my parents radicalize over the past 4 years. And because it's been such a slow process, brought on by things like COVID, brought on by things like, just this, it's what you said earlier, Alex. Not that long ago, the Republican Party, even though it was disingenuous, was able to call themselves the small government party, the fiscally conservative party. They can't do that anymore. They've spent the past 4 years giving insane numbers of like loopholes, bailouts, whatever to their corporate friends. And
Tariffs and handouts to farmers. I mean, like,
yes,
that's literally the exact opposite of what their core beliefs are. And you watch them change their stripes like that.
yeah. And as Daniel said on the show last week and said in his article that he came on to discuss, people have noticed. It's not It's not like people haven't seen it. It's been very obvious. Trump will get up on his little podium and be like, "Oh, it's fine. I'm just going to do all this corrupt shit in broad daylight." Who will pick up on it? He really is like the Disney villain that announces his plan at the beginning of the movie. It's kind of great.
I think that that is actually a lot of where, so I don't know if I can like formulate it perfectly, but a lot of the radicalization that I've seen is actually people believing people. That's what I meant about like the suburban votes that are coming in. It's before they used to believe like, oh, we'll keep that over there. But then government started being perpetrated right onto the heads of them, their families, their friends. And people realized that, in fact, if you're not at the table, you're on the table. And that concept, which I think progressives, if you come from the radical side and you've been saying, inequality, because it's not like inequality in 2010 was way better. It was horrible, horrible. But at that point, when I would tell people, like inequality is accelerating under the Obama administration, the stimulus and the bailouts went to the banks, but the mortgage programs are screwing over the people. And we're seeing waves of foreclosures around the country. But there was a significant enough portion of the country that was quote unquote fine, and they could be like, "Oh, you're overblowing it. Yeah, that's what you always say. It'll never be good enough for you. You're that right." Like that whole idea. That is what I think has been shown to be an illusion, right? Because there were all these people that really believed that Republicans believe in something, and that's
Mm-hmm.
out the window.
Absolutely.
Right. And so when I used to say, like, all Republicans believe in is power, people used to get offended at me. They'd be like, that's ridiculous. And now they're like, yeah, clearly all they believe in is power. Um, so I moved to Republicans are garbage. And then people are offended with me. And I'm like, good, good. Um, prove me wrong that Mitch McConnell. Um, so it has taken people's ability, the Trump era has taken people's ability away to have the scales over their eyes, to pretend that things are fine. And that I don't think you can put back into the bottle.
No, and I mean, it really, this is terrible, and watch me be totally wrong, but it's been hitting me over the past week that it's possible Trump is almost out of office, and it's possible we're on the wave of some really incredible and exciting political organizing and behavior in this country. Because I think we're all, everybody has been impacted by this administration. And I think it's really, there are a lot of people who justifiably are like, oh, okay, well, these privileged people should have been awake earlier. Sure, whatever, but they're awake now. I think that's interesting. I think that's exciting.
And you want to know where I see, because I agree. And, we don't need to caveat every time. Trump could totally win. We could be,
Right.
days away from full fascism. So keep
Yay!
fighting. Um, But if that isn't the case, remember the fucking remember back when Obama took over, it was after W. Bush, a disaster. He
Yes.
destroyed part of the world. He killed hundreds of thousands of people. Thousands of Americans died in this war that was just mind-bogglingly stupid. And then the bankers crushed the world economy because they're so greedy that they will steal the whole thing, watch the world burn. And then the hope and change. And again, Obama accomplished some good things, and I was there, and it was, we fought hard and everything. It's not all bad, but um, they decided not to do anything about the perpetrators of these crimes. They literally, it was a policy. It was a policy. Steve Mnuchin could have been prosecuted, but instead he's treasurer right now. The head of the CIA tortured people. Gina, whatever, Haspel, she's a torturer. It's
Yeah.
on record. And instead of going to prison, or at least trying to put them in prison, and they could have failed. It's actually hard. DOJ would have to prosecute them. They'd have high priced lawyers. Da 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 da. I get it, but they didn't even try to put any of the torturers in prison. They didn't even try to put any of the bankers in prison. They actually, there was, and it wasn't like it was Obama. It was sort of a gestalt, not including me and the progressives who were like, what do you mean? But Nancy Pelosi said it, right? At the time, it was like, we've got to look forward. We've got to look forward. That I don't feel is happening right now, because I think there are people who are like, we are going to look forward, but part of looking forward is holding accountable
Yes.
people for the crimes
And
that they have committed.
And it's absolutely overdue. I'm not a big fan of Democrats in power who have not done their duty by the American people. I'm still going to vote for them over other options, but it's long overdue, and I 100% agree, because it's just Trump has taken too much. And not just Trump, but every single part of the Republican Party that has knowingly enabled and encouraged so they can get their insane corporate stimulus pills passed. And it's people really need to understand, as you said, Alex, this is motivated entirely by financial gain. Entirely. There is no part of this party anymore which is like, wow, I just love Jesus so much, and I just love unborn babies, and that's why I vote for Trump. No, it's for money. Like, that is literally the only thing that is tying that specific part of the Republican Party together. And then out in America, I'm not going to call it real America, because that is not real America. That does not represent us. You have people who are exhibiting cult-like behavior because of their own racist, bigoted, whatever. And again, that's not everyone, I guess, but at this point, it kind of is. I mean, would you agree with that? I think anyone who is still voting for Trump at this point, maybe 2016 is different.
You have to be, at the very least, you have to be okay enough with all of the things that he's done that you'll throw your vote to him. And join the great intellectual ranks of Lil Wayne, who just cast his hat in the ring for Donald Trump. I think it costs about $500,000 or so for Lil Wayne. The part of where we are in terms of accountability, and I don't think that everyone who voted for Trump is going to be. I don't think there are shy Trump voters. I do think there are shy Biden voters at this point, because I think that Trump voters are generally loud, arrogant, and very out there. But there's a lot of Biden voters all over the suburbs and rural areas who don't go and talk about who they're going to vote for, because they're scared of the bullies that actually accumulate around the Trump milieu. But that's why holding people accountable and it is so key, because otherwise that movement is gonna grow. That bullying, paramilitary, right-wing, neo-Nazi movement will continue to grow unless people are held accountable for encouraging it and for fomenting it. And then I will just end my little spiel here on what I want to work on with you is one really specific idea, which is, I don't know if anyone's working on it yet, so we have to figure it out. And if they are, we can help them. And if not, we have to find someone to do it. Is we should force the Trump organization to pay back every single penny of taxpayer dollars that they have gotten into the hotels, the golf courses, all of it. And in fact, I don't care if we ever win that battle. I just want to be fighting over them owing whatever it's going to be, because I want all the documents. I want the bill. I want the hundreds of millions of dollars that this family has looted from the taxpayer. I want to fight about that forever. I want to call all of the Trump kids in one after another into a courtroom and have Ivanka actually detail what she did for these tens of millions of dollars. I want to know about the LLC that got $300 million from the campaign. All of that. I want all of that information. And mainly, I want to drive the Trump organization and business into bankruptcy, which is where it was headed. And this whole grift was actually to save the financial future of Donald Trump himself by stealing taxpayer money. And I want those family members to pay that money back to the taxpayers.
Let's do it. I mean, seriously, let's just do it. Because and people need to realize that that's what this was. These are not, I don't want to say they're not good faith actors, because they are. They are good faith actors in what they're looking for, which was a tremendous grift. I almost said heist, but this is not worthy of a heist.
Definitely not worthy of a heist. Are you kidding me?
No.
Yeah, they're not even con people, I think is the correct word, non-gendered for con man. They're just criminals.
They're just criminal.
They're just criminals, just normal old run, and they're not even that good at it. It's just that Donald Trump was born super rich, born lucky, and then he has just spent all of that money down into an enormous hole, and he is in bed with gangsters and criminals, and that's where he is. That's what this is all about. That's why he's willing to break. And it actually goes back to what people realize, that if you believe that norms and institutions are going to protect you, because they have for the past decades at least, and maybe since the founding of this country, like, oh, well, they can't do that because you literally only need one criminal sitting in the White House, like a full-on criminal like Donald Trump, to realize no rules, no norms, no institutions can protect the people. Only people power can protect the people.
I would like to acknowledge that Brad has put in the chat that the correct term is con folks.
Yeah, so I think that's right.
Brad. I appreciate that. Yeah, so really, Alex, we have so much in common. But one of the things that we both love very much is history and books. And I think that
and heists,
of course. It's really interesting to me how people will have such bad takes on how much power we really have. I was spending time with a gentleman and he was like, well, like, do these protests like do anything really? Yes, they do. You look throughout history, the history of this country, whether it was the abolitionist movement or the labor movement or any other number, the suffragist movement, like, it's really fascinating to me that people underestimate how much power and how much solidarity we have and can accomplish. Like, where is this version of history where women were like, please, we'd like to vote? And Woodrow Wilson was like, well, sure, ladies, here you go. That's not what happened. They were like chaining themselves to fences and getting force-fed raw eggs in prison and shit. This was not a happy time, but they won. They won. And this has happened over and over again in this country. The industrialists of the 19th century were straight up murdering workers for protesting. This has been a grisly and constant struggle, and it's probably always going to be with us, unfortunately. I'm not excited about that. But when people underestimate the power that we have as mass movements, as people who are ethically mobilizing towards a better future, they forget that we have won this battle so many times. Why do people forget that? Are they just lazy? Because I think it's laziness.
Oh, there's a bunch. Some of them are complicit. And our education system is garbage because it has been created that way. I mean, public education works, and it is one of the beautiful ideas of humanity. but it costs money. It takes resources. And right now we spend all of the resources on weapons of war. And, education is a state budget. And the state budget, it's basically a showdown between health and education. And since we allow the insurance companies and the pharmaceutical corporations to just rip us off, it means students get less and Wall Street gets more. And we've made that choice for the past 40 years. Now we can reverse that. And that's what you're talking about. We have to remind ourselves of our power. Just to go international for a second, there's a coup in Bolivia, U.S. backed fomented coup. It was like basically the New York Times and Elon Musk, who said this democratic election that happened, where Morales was democratically elected, had irregularities, and then they rushed the story and they got on, and then they pushed him out, put in these right wing dictators. Um, oh man, I'm getting tensed. There's a fly in my shot here,
I'm
and
getting tensed.
he's not going to land on my head. Um, but then what happened is the people stood up and told Elon Musk to go fuck himself. That he wasn't going to steal their lithium, which is what it was all about, money again. And they elected Morales's handpicked successor from the same party, because when the people are united, they literally can't be defeated. And I just part of it is the comfort in America. Like it is not as real sometimes for enough people are like, it doesn't affect me. But that's what I was talking about. Like that's been shattered. And I think more people understand it affects them. And now it's about seeing that when you stand, I mean, it's kind of fundamentally bizarre how powerful it is that just getting a big group of people and literally standing somewhere, like in the public square, in the agora, and saying, we demand this, that works, right?
Oh
And it
yeah.
works a lot because power is like, oh man, the people are demanding, and it really starts to seep into people and understanding that they're not powerful, we're powerful. We
Well, and like
lend them our power.
there's like a fundamental lack of I don't want to say empathy, but perspective taking, which is like, all right, imagine you're some congressman, right? You're like in your office. You look out, into whatever, I guess the swamp. You see thousands of people mobilizing over a certain issue. That's not going to affect you? Of course it is. Why do you think those goofy, like that goof, all these goofy photo shoots happen this summer with members of Congress and their like African traditional garb? You remember that? Yes, it was goofy, but the point is they listened. And we have to just keep pushing. And I think a lot of people are like, well, it's not enough. It's not enough because they're not going to willingly just start doing the things we want them to do. It is on us to keep organizing, keep protesting, keep standing in the agora and demanding change. And this is the thing. Cynicism is a luxury. And personally, I think cynicism is for lazy people and cowards. People are like, oh, I'm just so negative. So you're a coward, is what you're saying. You don't have any balls. That's fine. You can just say that. I'm a coward. But people don't want to say that. Instead, they say, oh, things will never change. Things are always changing. Things have done nothing but change. And it doesn't happen on accident. It happens when really brave people are like, you know what? You fuckers can shoot at me if you want. I'm not leaving until we have a conversation about voting, climate change, Black Lives Matter, etc. I'm very
Yeah.
excited, Alex. I think we're on the verge of a good time in history if we can get there.
Yeah, I mean it's a fork. I think that much is clear.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but a lot of the worry is, so if Trump wins or seals the election, the people are going to have a response, and that I think is unavoidable. I believe that people understand that the political power is not enough. You need people power. You need strategic communications power. We're still working on that one. The media revolution has not actually happened yet. The plutocrats still own far too much Man, this Pence fly is really bugging me.
Are you sure it's
Um,
not the same one? Maybe he wants an interview.
it could be that. Uh, and of course, it's not enough. I like those people like, well, what does it actually do? And you're like, well, nothing in isolation. It's
Mhm.
all of it together. We have to elect people,
Right.
and we have to bottom up organize so that we're actually electing better Democrats while we're electing Democrats. So we're changing who the Democrats are. AOC on the cover of Vogue talking about, a new type of Democrat who is going to be judged by if they've made people's lives better, which is actually an old type of Democrat. It's just this aberration from 1980 till nowish 2016, um, that we have to change. That's one thing. We have to stay in the street demanding. That's another thing. We have to take the means of producing media and telling our stories and create it our own content, and tell our own stories so that the stories don't just glorify the bosses and in fact glorify the people who are doing the work. All of those things together are what is going to just slowly but surely drive us in a good direction. And then it's all preparation for when it happens really fast. And that's when we're going to have to be ready to transition off of oil and coal and the extractive industries, because that's going to have to happen quickly if we're going to do anything on climate change. So it's like all of the organizing is to create change and to prepare for the moments when time speeds up and a lot of things happen very, very quickly, and we have to be ready for it.
Well, and this is the last thing I'll say. How do we always get to 1 hour so fast?
It's
My goodness.
fun.
That's true. It's fun. Um, there is a problem with us on the left where sometimes we can spend too much time framing ourselves as the aggrieved, like, how dare you do these things to me? And we need to be ready to be inhabiting power. We need to, as Kara brought up, like, all right, now that we've got power, we're going to use it. And that is a fundamental mistake. Exactly. Yes.
Trusting. That's what I
Yes.
always say.
And we need to start, I think part of it is practice. It's like, all right, every ounce of power we have, we're going to use. So when we have the power that we should have had, because we do represent real America in a very significant way, we are going to pass legislation. We are going to do things. We are going to create the society that we should have always had, which is fair and just and kind and gentle. So we need to start practicing that now because we're not victims. We are the majority. We have the power. We just need to have that reflected in our governing institutions. Alex, do you have anything else you want to say as we approach?
That that's it. That's the. I mean, Mike Papantonio, a friend of mine, he has a one of his big speeches that I plagiarize all the time is the cavalry's not coming. And the left has to understand that the cavalry is not coming. There is no one waiting in the wings to fix things. There are no heroes who are going to magically do all of this stuff. We are the cavalry. We are the people who are going to be the heroes in the story where we defeat the villains, and their extractive industry money, where we defeat the villains on Wall Street, where we defeat the villains who want to commodify our lives and extract value from our lives. And we're going to defeat that entire system and build a system based on justice for the people, in its place. And that is a mental shift that I do think is happening. People have realized the cavalry's not coming because we are the cavalry. And that's what we like to talk about on Solidarity Live here. I'm Alex Lawson. Thanks for joining us this week on Solidarity Live. Jocelyn, as always, thank you. Brad, you guys don't see Brad, but we can see him. He produces all of this. So we will see you all again next week and it'll be a whole different
A
game.
whole new world. I'm so excited. Bye,
Bye.
guys.